Hey everyone, how you doing? Good, good. I feel a little bit like I did when I was first introduced to all the employees of VSECU. My goal in that was to be able to say VSECU without stumbling over my words the first time, because I figured that wouldn't be a very good sign if I couldn't even pronounce the name of the company. And I was really impressed. Where's Krista? You said irresistibility? No problem. I mean, it just came right out, no problem. Irresistible companies. I sort of had the same thought here. I got a call from Jane and said, would you come and speak to us about what it takes to become an irresistible company? And of course, my immediate reaction was, that's awesome. I'm so flattered that you guys would even think of us in this regard. And then, of course, I hung up the phone and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say? So you have to bear with me. I don't know if you're going to be interested in this or not, but we are going to tell you our story, and we think our story is pretty cool, and we think we're doing some pretty neat things. But I think we didn't set out to sort of become irresistible. I think as I've learned more and I hear Krista talk about what it takes to be irresistible, frankly, there are quite a few themes, and if I need some help getting through some of this stuff, Krista, I think I might just ask you to come up and help me out. But that's our goal for today, is really tell you what we're doing, and we're on the path, if you will, hopefully to irresistibility, and our story is going to evolve and it's going to change, and hopefully we'll continue to grow and develop from there. So let me, do I have let's see if I can figure this out. Oh, look at that. So let me start by just telling you a little bit about the VSECU, and you already heard some of that from Ned, and we are a credit union. We first and foremost are a member-owned cooperative and a not-for-profit credit union. Everyone who lives and works in Vermont can be a member of VSECU. We actually just recently expanded our field of membership also to include members of the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. So you can think of our membership as being focused here in Vermont and among Vermonters, but also for those that identify with our values and our mission, particularly in the area of energy efficiency and renewable energy, can also become members of the VSECU. You heard some of the statistics earlier. We were established 70 years ago, actually. We've been around quite some time. We were established out of the State Employees Union, and for a number of years we were really only open to members of the state employees. I would say about a decade and a half ago, expanded our field of membership. Like a lot of credit unions, they became what's called community-based memberships, and they begin to expand geographically, usually by counties. We were the first and still remain the only credit union in Vermont that's actually open to all Vermonters. So we have essentially a statewide field of membership and then beyond, given our relationship with NESE. We have over 100, we actually have 180 employees at this point in time, about $730 million in assets. We have quite a membership base, 63,000, just a little bit more than that, 9 branches throughout the state, from Brattleboro and Bennington to Burlington, Vermont, and really everywhere in between. We refer to ourselves as VSECU because you don't have to be a state employee to be a member anymore. So we actually try not to use Vermont State Employees Credit Union, even though that technically is our formal name. So we go by the VSECU, not just to make it difficult to say our name. To show you the power of cooperatives, we've actually put it before our membership at least twice to change our name, and they've, of course, voted it down. Wasn't the first thing on my list of things to do. So we like to think of ourselves, though, as a little bit more than just a credit union. And I'm not going to go through these because you heard about them just a few moments ago in my introduction. But we really are more focused, or at least equally focused, not just on providing banking services, but really services that have a positive impact on our members' lives. We think of ourselves more as a social impact cooperative that also provides banking services alongside other value-added services. You've heard about our relationship with Milk Money, the Lightning Jar. These are things that may be a little atypical for what you would think of coming from a bank or a credit union, but this is really part of our DNA at VSECU in terms of really focusing in on our purpose, which you heard earlier, and figuring out what we can do for our members to really improve the quality of their life on an ongoing basis. I should probably just keep this in my hand. So this notion of irresistibility, like I said, we haven't really thought of it like this. This might be a good opportunity to tell you a little bit about how I came to VSECU. As was said earlier, I was working for a global insurance asset manager and risk consultant. We had operations throughout the world. We were headquartered in Hartford, Connecticut, but had offices in London and Germany. I helped open our office in Hong Kong. I was on the executive team there and had responsibility for essentially all things business development, sales, marketing, PR, internal communication, and I also sat on the executive committee. I guess, you know, I was on that path to sort of move into the leadership or the CEO role at some point in time. We were owned by a private equity company, and woke up one morning and honestly just came to the realization I didn't really want that job. I didn't want to spend the rest of my time at home when my girls at the time were, you know, in seventh. My oldest was in 7th grade. I didn't want to spend the rest of my time with them in an airplane, not with them. You know, that was quite a realization because everything really from a professional standpoint was going quite well, and the business was doing well as well. At the same time, purely by coincidence, I get a call from someone who says, "Hey, there's this job for CEO of this local credit union in Vermont. I think you'd be really good at it." I'll admit, it wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. But the relevant aspect of this is this person basically said, "I know it sounds crazy, spend the weekend and just promise me that you'll think about it differently," which is why I'm calling you, because I know that that's kind of what you'll do. And oh, by the way, if you're interested, I need a letter of interest on Monday. So that's sort of how that worked. And what I came to realize is when I looked at VSECU, I saw a huge opportunity. What I saw was a private organization with a very public mission to improve the quality of life of its members, who happen to be all Vermonters. And given my prior history in economic development, that really appealed to me. And then I saw a not-for-profit organization with a $700 million balance sheet. How many of you sit on boards or are involved in nonprofits in Vermont? How many of you would appreciate a $700 million balance sheet? Yeah. That's the conclusion I came to. Let's just say I was not a traditional CEO candidate. I really do mean this when I say my first day as CEO was my first day in a credit union. It's pretty unusual for a credit union board to step outside of itself and hire someone not just from outside of the organization, which is actually fairly normal, but actually hire someone from completely outside of the industry. And really what I did is I came in and I talked to the board. We were making an investment in one another, really, is how this worked out. And I was really clear. I didn't want to just operate a credit union, or at least what I saw at the time as a warm and fuzzy community bank. That wasn't my background. And by the way, we have an extraordinary management team. You don't really need that. But what I was really interested in is how do we take our purpose, our mission, put it in front of everything we do and figure out how to bring more impact to that mission. And if that was an effort that they were interested in, then I was interested in them. And that's sort of how I became involved in VSECU. And then, of course, I'm introduced to the employees at VSECU. And as many of my colleagues who, by the way, VSECU employees, can you raise your hand so everyone knows who you are? Thank you very much for coming and showing your support for me. But by the way, they're the experts. Whatever I have to say, they can either validate or tell you that's right or wrong. My first day, I'm introduced as a new CEO, and which can happen with me from time to time. I got a little carried away and told everyone, look, I want people lined up outside. I literally said, I want people lined up outside our front door. I don't ever want to have to advertise for an open position again, because we're such an awesome place to work that we never have to advertise. We just go select someone from the front line outside the door. And that, by the way, includes members breaking down our walls to join our cooperative, because we provide that kind of meaningful value, where membership is essentially equivalent with residency in Vermont. If you're a resident of Vermont, you become a member of VSECU, just like if you're a student at MIT, you're a member of the co-op, because that's what every student does at MIT. Same dynamic here. So really, The challenge, if you will, to become irresistible, even though we didn't call it, was really sort of, if I'm being honest, accidentally laid out at that first introduction. But we've really been on that path ever since. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we did that. But before we started down that path, it was really important for us because the reality is the world is changing, and there are a lot of dynamics that are going on out there that we tend to focus on the opportunities in front of us. And on the exciting stuff that will actually advance our mission. But the reality is there are a lot of threats, particularly to our business, particularly to credit unions and community banks. And honestly, in interacting with a lot of my colleagues in the credit union space, I think most of us have our heads stuck in the sand. And I'll tell you, based on some of these factors, I think irrelevancy is actually quite a possibility within our lifetime. And so there are definitely reasons why we have to change, why we have to become irresistible, but we also have to fundamentally change how we work together, which would be part of what I'm talking about. In Vermont, we've already talked about the demographic problem that we have, and in our experience, because really we represent Main Street Vermonters, and what we're finding is that quality of life that we all talk about and that we all value, and the quality of life that many of our members are experiencing isn't the same. And that gap between those two levels of experience is getting wider, not narrower, unfortunately, particularly outside of Burlington and Chittenden County. In the meantime, in our industry, we have all these fintech companies that are starting up. They're starting up from ground, where they're starting up with a lot of capital. They're not operating in our regulatory space, and they're building products and services and technology from scratch that, frankly, is better than what we're providing with our legacy systems. So that's happening every single day. The day that Amazon decides that it wants to get into the banking experience will be a game changer for all of us credit unions and community banks. And it's actually the credit unions and community banks that are at greatest risk because we don't have the same access to capital that the large money center banks have. We've been in a low interest rate environment forever. That's the worst, other than an inverted yield curve, which typically reverts itself fairly quickly. A low interest rate environment is the absolute worst environment for a bank and credit union to operate in because we are essentially a spread business. We borrow from you on a short-term basis, and then we'll lend out to our members at a spread over what we borrowed, what the cost of borrowing from you was. When interest rates are really compressed and really low for a sustained period of time, that puts enormous pressure on our margins. And look, we're a not-for-profit. My goal, and it's ironic to say this out loud, I still haven't gotten used to it given my prior background, is to make as little money as possible. We still have to make some money in order to reinvest in our membership and to continue to provide the services they expect. And then at the same time, following 2008, the regulatory environment on us has expanded tremendously. And the combination of low interest rate environment, margin pressure, and the regulatory environment is really pushing us towards what I'll call commoditization. I don't know, I speak to UVM students twice a year, and I always ask people, how many of you have ever heard of a checking account? And literally half the room raises its hand. How many of you have ever written a check? And there's like a couple people that actually raise their hand. So, I mean, it's already here. I just turned 50 this year, and if I have to call someone to get a service issue resolved, if I can't take care of it online by myself, I'm kind of pissed off, to be honest with you. If I have to actually go inside a business and take care of it, then you lost me. And so if that's me and I'm 50, this has already changed. At the same time, there's some pretty cool stuff going on out there that I think represents potential game changers. We're seeing businesses not just talk about corporate social responsibility, but actually embrace social purpose as core to their mission, core to their DNA, core to their culture, and really figuring out how to achieve social purpose and business results at the same time. Create that shared value that I believe Michael Porter is now talking about in terms of its impact on society at large. Triple bottom line, the emergence of B Corps, the emergence of Banking on Values, which is an organization that we're proud to be a member of. And then from a cultural standpoint, you're starting to hear things like emergent leadership, adaptive organizations, agile. There are a lot of different terminologies for this, but the point being that the tools are in front of us to address what is a very complicated and dynamic environment. And it's just a matter of taking advantage of those tools and applying them in a way that makes sense. And in our case, our answer is purpose and culture. And here, Krista, is where you can come up and give the rest of the presentation, because what Krista described to you earlier is essentially what we're doing. It starts for us with purpose, with vision. This is how we think about our vision. At the center of everything we do is our purpose. Our purpose is to improve the lives of our members, who happen to be all Vermonters, or at least prospective members happen to be all Vermonters in the communities in which we live. I like to say that the most important thing that we've done at VSECU is we've taken the purpose off of the static strategic, 3-year strategic plan, which we actually don't have anymore, thank God. And we put it in front of everything we do, and we, more importantly, challenge ourselves to figure out what we can do every single day to bring more impact to that purpose. Now, we were lucky at VSECU because our purpose was actually already established, and people understood it. They could name it. If you asked them why we exist at VSECU, this is what they would have told you before I got there, which is really unusual. If you ask most organizations, why do you exist, they usually answer you by telling you what they do. We exist to improve lives. That's why we exist, and that's why we're on this world. The day that is no longer necessary, then we won't be in existence anymore, and that'll be a day we're celebrating. What was difficult for us and what we didn't have a good handle on was our how. What connected what we did every day to our purpose? In business terms, you can think of this as value proposition. I like to refer to it as our secret sauce. But what is that unique characteristic that differentiates us from everyone else? What's the, I can't even remember that movie. What's the one thing? What's the one thing that makes you unique? Russ probably knows. He's like the master of trivia. What's the one thing that makes you unique in the marketplace? What characterizes you? When people think about VSECU, what do they think of? And we spent a lot of time kind of reflecting on that and working within the community to understand what that was and what we wanted it to be, more importantly. And what we came to the conclusion was that at our core, VSECU is a member-owned cooperative. What is a cooperative at its core? It is a group of people that self-organize to provide each other access to services that would otherwise be more difficult to obtain without that self-organization. So at our core, we are a cooperative, and at its core is cooperation. So in a word, our secret sauce is cooperation. We bring people together. We improve lives by bringing people together. We don't necessarily have to do everything ourselves, but we want to empower things to happen that improve the lives of our members. And then that allows us to rethink what we do every single day. Yes, we provide banking services, we do a lot of other things, but more importantly, what we do is help our members achieve financial, environmental, and social prosperity. And that then becomes essentially our vision. In short, empowering possibilities for Vermonters, members, and coworkers to succeed and achieve sustainable prosperity for themselves. So that's essentially our purpose. What happens when you put purpose in front of everything you do? Here's a few examples. You've heard about the lightning jar. Dimitri's here, who was our partner. I don't know where you are, Dimitri, but was our partner in that. We worked with the town to really establish a co-working facility inside our branch in Bennington. And what is the lightning jar at its core? It brings people together, right? It brings people together to try to create economic opportunity from the ground up. In the same case with Milk Money. What does Milk Money do at its core? It's a crowdfunding portal, but what it's trying to do is actually connect everyday Vermonters with their local businesses to provide a more sustainable funding source to help support their growth over time from the same people that actually frequent those businesses, and ultimately a sustainable model. V-Green, which you may not have heard of, is our energy efficiency and renewable energy financing program. VSECU is a leader in that program. By the end of the year, we'll probably have about $40 million in V-Green loans. It's growing at roughly 50 to 80% a year. It's our fastest growing portfolio. It's also our best performing portfolio in the sense that people don't default on their solar loans or on their home energy renovation work or on their heat pumps because they have an emotional connection to the work that they're doing, and they'll do anything not to default on those particular loans. And then we just took the leadership role from from Harpoon, who had started the Harpoon Point to Point, I think back in 2002, and was there to raise money to help the Vermont Food Bank in its mission to end hunger in Vermont. And we're going to take the leadership role over for the point to point. I give you these examples to show you what happens when you take purpose and you actually put it in front of everything you do and let it guide the things that you do. Probably, I won't say the most important, but equally important, if we're going to be successful over the long term, is to address culture and values. And for us, culture is really everything that we're about. Culture is the foundation of everything to do. And I just want to make sure I have my notes here because there's a couple things I want to make sure that I say. For us, culture defines how we work together. It's the behavior that we exhibit with one another. It's how we interact with our members. And in the banking world, we're dominated by policies and procedures. It's what we build into those policies and procedures. And so we believe that culture is really just the flip side of brand. And you guys see the brand that we promote into the marketplace, but we can't promote cooperativism and lead a cooperative movement externally in our society if we're actually not working cooperatively internally. And VSECU, frankly, when I got there, was a very traditional place, much like every other regulated financial organization. We had a very traditional hierarchy. I joke around it. Look, our CEO was beloved, and he was a visionary, but he made every single decision in the organization, and so that fundamentally changes how people work together. It actually encourages them not to work together, right? Because you really only need to convince one person. And if you only need to convince one person, then you don't really need buy-in from anyone else. So not only was that style not suited, that's not my personal style, but more importantly, that doesn't reflect the purpose that we have and that we want to have on society at large. So we had to go about changing our brand internally to really promote cooperation. Oh, wrong one. There we go. If culture is defined by our behavior, then our behavior is defined by our values. And at VSECU, we follow these values. We are cooperative. We do follow all cooperatives throughout the world, ascribe to the 7 cooperative principles. If you look it up, you Google 7 cooperative principles, it'll pop up. Those principles are principles that we follow. We also follow the principles of sustainable banking, which I won't spend a lot of time on here, but is essentially focused on triple bottom line assets, operating in the real economy, transparency, resiliency, those sort of things. And then organizationally, internally, Vermont values, things that we consider to be synonymous with Vermont. Be real, be human, be playful and have fun. Those types of things that really define how we want to interact with one another and the values that we keep that drive our behavior internally. For us, this journey that we're on, and we've really intensified, if you will, over the last 9 months, it's not just a change effort. It's really a complete transformation. And we don't see it as one that ever is going to be over. This is taking this notion of a learning organization and really embedding it into everything we do every single day. Hopefully, if we're successful, we're always learning, we're always changing, the culture will always be dynamic. One thing that will always have in common is that it'll be driven by our purpose and our values. Our objectives with our transformation are pretty simple. We want to get more people engaged in the work of VSECU. We want VSECU to be an awesome place to work and for people literally to be lined up outside the front door. We want to create, as a result of those things, we want to create incredible member value. And again, have members lined up outside our front door, which, by the way, I'm all expecting you to do. For those of you that are, thank you very much. Be an environment where people continually learn and grow, and be an environment where everyone's voice is heard. And those are our objectives with our transformation. So what's the first thing that I did as CEO? And what is the thing that if you ask any one of my colleagues over there, what's the most important thing that he's done since he's been here? I allowed them to wear jeans and I gave them free coffee. It's true. It's true. And I've become, my personal brand now is associated with the sort of the bank CEO that wears jeans. But these may seem like gimmicks, and honestly, there are a lot of crazy things going on out there. You know, ping pong tables in a rec room, free candy all over the place, all that good stuff. And this may seem like that, but actually, in our sense, these were actually tied to our values. We didn't we didn't change the dress code because we were trying to create an irresistible environment for our employees and we wanted them to be happy. That certainly was part of it. But as a member-owned co-op, our objective actually was to create an environment where we looked like our members, where they didn't walk in and deal with people that didn't look like them. We're all owners of the place. Our owners walk inside and outside of our door every single day. We wanted to be real. That's one of our core values. And we wanted to be real to our members. By the way, our members didn't notice, and those that did notice were very happy for our employees, but our employees were thrilled. So why change it, right? In the sense of coffee, also tied to our values. The reality was, I would go get a cup of coffee from the coffee machine right outside my office, and I would get my coffee and I'd go back to work. But if you were an employee other than me, you would go to the coffee machine and you put 75 cents into the cup and you get your coffee. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me. It took 6 months for this to occur to me, but why is everyone else paying for the coffee and I'm not? And so, the answer was really easy. Either everyone pays or no one pays. And yeah, I did want to make the employees happy. So no one pays for coffee anymore. But I guess what I would say is that it's really, let's see, this is the problem with working on an iPad. It's more than just coffee and jeans. It's more than ping pong tables in the rec room. It's more than all that gimmicky stuff that you read about. That's not irresistible in our sense. In our sense, irresistible is completely transforming how we work together in our environment. It's changing, the nature of work. The reality is, if you look at an org chart today, and you look at an org chart from the 1920s, you're not really going to tell much of a difference, but the world has completely changed since then. The reality is the way we work together hasn't. And that's what we're after at VSECU. Maybe they're at that at UVM as well. It just came from UVM, that's why it's on my mind. And really, it's the headwinds are strong, as I said earlier, and it's hard. We're really taking people out of their comfort zone, myself included, and we have to work at it every single day. And it's not easy, but it's really interesting. It's really challenging, and it really engages all of us in the work at VSECU. Let me just show you a couple tools that we use, and then I think my time is coming to a close here pretty soon. A couple tools that we use to help guide our transformation effort. This is one of them. This looks really boring, probably, I would think. So you may not have expected it. But really what we have come to learn, and we worked with an organization called The Ready, which I want to give them credit for this particular tool, because they did a lot of research and they talked to a lot of organizations. And what they've come to find out and what we've learned from them is that just like your computer system has its own operating system, your phone has an operating system, every organization has an operating system. And for the most part, every organization's operating system is defined by these 9 areas: structure, authority, communication, meetings, coordination, purpose, policy, strategy, resource allocation, and people, right? Those are the areas that really define how your organization operates. In our case, we've really spent the last 4 months mostly focused on the areas of authority and decision-making. Remember the environment I talked about earlier where decisions were really centralized, and our goal to push decision-making further out and frankly closer to the members? Well, that's actually a pretty disciplined process. You can do what I started doing by telling everyone they were empowered and then having a bit of chaos, or you can apply some structure to that actually provides what I like to call a safety net. So you're not in the trapeze without a safety net. And there are tools that you can use to help make decisions and understand what your decision rights are. More importantly, if you don't know what your decision rights are, there's a process by which you can consult with others and find out. But how we make decisions, who's authorized to make decisions, and what's the process by which we make decisions is something that we've spent a lot of time on. The other piece that we've spent a lot of time on is information and communication. How do we actually talk to one another? And like most organizations, I mean, we're not a big organization, but we're 180 people. Most organizations our size don't talk to each other very transparently. You know, they call it water cooler talk for a reason. It's a private, right? And it tends to define a culture. Unfortunately, that water cooler talk tends to define a culture. And what we're trying to do, and this is one of the reasons why it's really hard, is we're taking all those tensions that are talked about at the water cooler, and we're processing through them as information. And that's really uncomfortable at first, right? Because you're asking people, no, I want you to share with everyone what you just said to me at the water cooler. Because we want to get it out in the open, and we want to deal with it. If you keep talking about the water cooler, it doesn't ever... You may feel better because you got it off your chest, but it didn't do anything. And so we want to process through it, and we want to always process through it. We want to process tension as information, not as conflict. And when you make things more transparent, you can process through tension as information versus conflict. The other area that we spent a lot of time in is meetings. How many of you have too many meetings? How many of you, the meetings that you have are super productive? Oh, wow. I'm impressed. You need to come up next and talk about your meeting structure. We have way too many meetings, and they're not particularly very effective. And I'm being a bit harsh. I mean, they got the job done, but they could have been much more efficient. So we've spent a lot of time really instilling a certain meeting structure to our meetings and defining certain types of meetings, whether they're action meetings, whether they're retrospectives, whether they're vision meetings, and putting a regular operating rhythm in place to ensure that you're doing all of those in a regular period of time. And that's been super helpful. And I can tell you that in doing this for 9 months, those meetings that we've been the most disciplined about are going, so I'll just talk about myself. I won't drag my colleagues into this, but the senior team meeting was meeting for like 3 or 4 hours every week. And we were like ready to slit our wrist afterwards. I mean, it was horrible. Now sorry, that's not really very politically correct. That's not good. My apologies. They weren't very productive. Now we're meeting in under an hour, and we're getting more things done in that 45 minutes that we're meeting than we were getting done in the 3 hours beforehand. And that's because we're being disciplined about how we actually process through a meeting and how we structure the decisions. It's also a lot about trust and trusting other people to make decisions outside of that meeting, as opposed to have to have an input or an opinion on everything that actually happens, which was the case in our case. We also, as another tool, probably one of the more powerful tools we use is these set of design principles. I think the way you can think of these in the sort of the bold orange, those are the new muscles that we're trying to train. And then the second word, are really the old habits that we're trying to break. And when you think about habits, habits are essentially our way as a human race of being efficient without thinking. And we've developed those habits over time, and these habits go back to, like I said, the early, the industrial age, when everything was about efficiency and doing things the same way. Well, that world has changed. And so things that particularly relevant to us that maybe you might find relevant to you as well, this notion of progress over perfection. Boy, we could solve a problem and we could get it just right, and analyze every single angle and take 6 months to decide on the decision, and then take another 6 months to actually roll it out, and it's completely outdated by the time we actually do anything about it. We were so focused on not getting it wrong. I can see people laughing, so this obviously is going on in other places. We were so focused on what we wanted to avoid getting wrong that we weren't focused on getting anything right. And so now we're much more focused on what can we do today that moves us forward. And it should be really small, right? It doesn't need to be, we don't need to solve the world today. We just need to move forward. We just need to take action. And let's forget about perfection. In fact, let's embrace imperfection because that's how we learn. Relevant to decision rights, I'm willing to give you the decision right so long as you promise me that you're going to reflect on the decisions you make and adapt to them. And if you're not willing to make that promise, then I'm not willing to give you that decision right. And so that's sort of the philosophy behind that. Another one that, frankly, personally, I had a pretty big habit on this one, which is consent over consensus. Similar thought. When you think about decisions that are made by groups, we all talk lovingly about consensus. Well, we just want to get to consensus because consensus is wonderful. And it is wonderful, but it requires everyone to agree. And that's really hard because it also encourages everyone to have an opinion. And in the organization that we're building, I'm not going to say that our individual opinions don't matter, but they're much less relevant than what we can agree to do today and learn from and then agree to do tomorrow based on the learning that we from the decision we made yesterday. And that's how organizations will learn and evolve and adapt. And over time, we'll achieve much more significant success by approaching it that way than trying to get everyone on board on every single decision, because that just bogs us down and we don't get anything done. Another one for us was this notion of transparency over secrecy. And I don't want to give you the impression that working at VSECU is like working for the CIA, everyone's keeping secrets. But the reality is our way of working with one another kind of fostered that, right? Email is a classic example, and I'll talk about it in a second. Email is not an inherently transparent vehicle of communication because there's a whole protocol in politics about who gets copied, who gets blind carbon copied, and that's not very productive. And when you think about the difficulty, when you think about the number of people you have to communicate to, if you can communicate to them all at once in a fully transparent way, it's so much more efficient than picking and choosing. You can't push out enough information. There's too much information to take responsibility for pushing it out, as opposed to making everything transparent and available, and then people can pull down what they need in order to do their job or make a decision. And that was a particular struggle for us. So let me talk about some of the things that we did. How am I doing? Close, okay. Transparent communication. Some of what we call these transformation flips, things that we did that we're experimenting with even to this day. We moved all of our internal communication from email to Slack. How many people are familiar with Slack? Oh, quite a few. See, you guys are more progressive than we are. And we moved everything to Slack. So it sounds kind of simple, right? You just move from one vehicle to another, but the difference is Slack, as I like to view it, is essentially like the old TVs, right? Where you had the dial and you could tune into a different channel. And the same thing with Slack. They're all public channels. You can tune into whichever ones. You can follow the ones you want, but they're all accessible to. And so we're putting all the information out there for everyone to see, with certain exceptions about member information and human personnel matters and those kind of things. But with those as the exceptions, everything's out there. One of the most followed channels is actually what we call the leadership channel, which was really intended just to be the 5 leadership, senior vice presidents and myself. Easily one of the most followed channels. Interesting message in that, right? Operating rhythm. As I said, we put into place a very disciplined meeting structure. So every week, teams are having what we call weekly action team meetings. There's a very disciplined agenda to that team action meeting, and it feels really awkward the first month that you use it, and then it starts to really get really productive and efficient. And it's just, again, forcing yourself into a structure that allows you to default to action, as doing the work as opposed to actually just talking about the work. We created no meeting day. I'll tell you, this one's not really going very well. I think, is it today? No, it's not today. It's Thursdays. Thursdays are no meeting day at VSECU, and it's one of those things we're probably going to learn from. In an organization like ours, where we have a lot of member-facing employees, creating a no meeting day has proven to be a little bit more challenging. But the idea was noble, and we experimented with it, and we tried it, and we'll move on. One thing we do that's really cool, really interesting, is we have every Wednesday morning, tomorrow morning, we have something called Transformation Coffee. And this is actually a meeting where there is absolutely zero, we get a little frustrated with this from time to time, but there's nothing to do from this meeting. In other words, there's no follow-up. Such and such is going to do this and such is going to do that. This meeting is just to come together and talk about our transformation process. How are we feeling about it? What are we learning? What are we observing? What are some of the tensions that we're seeing in the organization that we want to process? And it's amazing. We get roughly 25 to 30 people every week. They're not the same people. Some of them are the same, but a rotation, if you will, that people either are calling into or coming into our offices in Montpelier, and just talking about culture and how our culture is evolving and what your experience is with that. And it's been transformative in and of itself. And then the last area is decision rights. I think we're still working on this one. I think probably the biggest movement we made, and it sounds like an obvious one, but it's really understanding in every decision who has the decision rights and getting that out in the open. You'd be surprised how often it's not really very clear to people who actually gets to make this decision. And 80% of the decisions in any organization usually can be made by the individual. And really, maybe another 10%, 15% can still be made by the individual, but requires some level of advice process with other affected groups or individuals. And it's like 5% of the decisions need to be bumped up that are maybe too risky to just try on your own, that need to be bumped up to someone with a little bit more responsibility. I'll finish it by just, how's it going? So what, right? Are we actually doing anything, achieving any progress as a result of all of this? And I can tell you that we've just come off of 2 years of some of our best financial performance in the history of the organization. We continue to grow despite some of Vermont's demographic challenges. For the first time, we were recognized as one of Vermont's best places to work. We've had 3 coworkers, colleagues at VSECU that have been named by Credit Union Magazine as Credit Union Rock Stars. 3 among, I think, approximately 60 over the last couple of years, one of which is right back there. Go ahead and raise your hand, Blair. Rock star, right there. Make sure you go say hello to him. We've also had one of our co-workers named a Rising Star by Vermont Business Magazine. So we're making significant progress on the financial piece, on the culture piece. I will tell you one of the best parts about my job is I get to meet with every new employee. And I've been asking every new employee over the last 4 years, 3.5 years, why did you come to us? And the answers I'm getting today are fundamentally different than the answers I got 4 years ago. 4 years ago, they didn't say it like this, but I need a job. And you guys paid well and have good benefits. Okay, great. And good hours. We've got a lot of retail folks that didn't like the hours they were working. Now I'm hearing, I love what you guys are doing in the community. I love what you guys stand for, and I want to be a part of it. And that's what we're starting to hear. I mean, Leah down here came to us from San Francisco. I don't know why she would come to Vermont from San Francisco. But she came because she loves what we're doing and wants to be a part of it. And you heard about some of our industry innovations. We're doing things that just aren't being done. Our partnership with Milk Money is unique in the country and was named among Credit Union Journal's top stories for 2016. We are right next to Donald Trump being elected president. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that is what it is. So we're doing good things there. I'll just leave you with a couple slides that I left my employees with, or my colleagues with, a couple weeks ago at an all-employee meeting. Here's the reality. This is really hard work. I'm not going to lie to you. It's really hard work. I'm out of my comfort zone every single day. Usually I'm the guy in the room that everyone looks to for the answers when no one else has any idea what the answers are. And I don't always know what the answers are, and many of my coworkers are feeling the same way. So it really requires a lot of courage. And the thing about courage is you only get courage if you actually try. So courage requires participation. So meaningful change requires courage. Courage requires participation. You can't change if you don't try. And so we're encouraging really everyone at VSECU to try, to participate. And last but not least, probably most importantly for at least our employees, and frankly I think for you, is to believe. Believe in what you do, believe in what we stand for, believe in our mission, believe in our values, believe in our culture, believe in change. Go find your passion, believe in what you do, and make it infectious and irresistible, if you will, to others. And I can tell you, at least in our experience, and we've just scratched the surface, I think you're going to see a lot more amazing things come from us. But I can promise you, if you do that, amazing things will come to you and your organizations as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.